Good morning, everyone, and welcome to JBDC's Virtual Biz Zone. My name is Dania Bennett, Technical Training Coordinator here at the JBDC, and I'll be sitting in for Sansia Campbell today while we focus on our topic, preparing products for the international market. Now, this is part two in our export series. Last week, we actually focused on assessing for export readiness. And that was done by our presenter, Miss Janelle Brown. And she is a senior officer exporter facilitation at JAMPRO. So if you missed that presentation, please go to our YouTube page, JBDC Jamaica, to just check that out and make sure you catch up with all of the good information that you missed out on last week. So this week, we will, as I said, be focusing on preparing products for the international market. And we have an excellent presenter for you here today. Her name is Ms. Shanicia Salmon, and she's actually the Export Research Policy and Advocacy Manager, responsible for driving trade policy, regional integration, and export growth at the Jamaica Manufacturers and Exporters Association. So just to tell you a little bit about our presenter today, she is actually an advocate for public and private representation. She represents Jamaica's private sector in CARICOM working groups, and she supports over 500 exporters and manufacturers through technical guidance and high-level stakeholder engagements. So she is well aware of what it takes to be in the export market, okay? She manages trade missions to Japan, Panama, the Bahamas, Trinidad and Tobago, and she also negotiates international memorandum of understanding, so MOUs. So she works at the intersection of policy, diplomacy, and private sector development. She's very passionate about using trade and economic policy as a tool for regional growth and integration, and she's actively seeking executive opportunities across CARICOM and to facilitate international development in spaces. So I'm sure she will be giving us a good presentation today on these areas. And so I just want to welcome you today, Shanicia. And please don't be afraid to interact with her, pick up on any information that you think is useful for you, and ask any questions. So I'm gonna hand over to you now.
Thank you very much. I must thank you for the invitation. And those of you who are here, manufacturers and exporters, I'm very passionate about helping businesses to export. And I'm just always, so proud of you for taking that leap because it is a very rewarding journey, but it is not a very easy one. And so I would implore all of you that while I go through my presentation, that you will ask questions and interact, or don't hesitate to reach out to me afterwards. So welcome to part two of the JBDC Export Readiness series. Today we're going to be moving from looking at market opportunity to looking at the product itself. We'll focus specifically on packaging, labeling, quality standards, and product adaptation for the different markets that you may be going in. And so the main message that I really want to leave with you after my presentation is that a product that sells successfully in Jamaica, it doesn't automatically mean that it will be ready for another market. There are things that you will have to do to prepare the product. You must be able to meet the country's laws, survive the export journey, and fit the sales channel that appeal to the intended customer. So as we go through the presentation, I want you to think about one or two products that you currently manufacture and that you hope to export. I'm hoping that you would have already had this in mind. And use that product to test each recommendation that I will be providing against your present level of readiness. All right, so let's get into it. So I want you to think about all your questions, drop them in the chat, and we'll address them as we go through the presentation. All right, so export readiness is viable before the product is even opened. So before a consumer even taste or open or use your product, several people would have already been informed about the opinion about its readiness. So from a regulatory perspective, they'll consider, is the product legal? They'll think about safety and correction in terms of the documents. And this includes matters such as your ingredients, are they approved for that particular target market? Mandatory labeling information that they need for products coming into their markets, standards, permits that should be traveling along with the relevant products, and any supporting certifications. From a buyer's perspective, buyer or distributor, so they'll be looking at a different set of issues. Can the product survive the transportation? So whatever you're shipping it in, can it survive the transportation from your market to wherever it is going to be going? Will it fit on the shelves or in the warehouse? So in the case of quantity with what you're planning to ship, is it practical? Does the product have enough remaining shelf life when it arrives? And from the consumer perspective, they'll be asking the simplest but perhaps the most commercially important question. Is the product clear, relevant, and worth choosing over relative products that your competitors will have? So export readiness therefore sits at the intersection of meeting compliance with commercial practicality and consumer appeal. If one of these areas has a weakness, then the product may struggle, if even the other areas are stronger. So it's really important to work with all regulators here in Jamaica, as well as those who will be supplying you with your packaging, for example, to ensure that you are meeting all of these criterias. So I want you to, ask yourself as you think about your product, which of these three perspectives has influenced your packaging decisions so far? We can organize these expectations into four product preparation decisions, which we'll see here on the screen. So I'll just give you a minute just to look at this. All right. So first we think about protecting the product, right? That's the primary consideration when it comes to your product. The packaging that you choose must be able to protect the product in such a way, depending on the product that you have. It will prevent any leakages, any spoilage, and any contamination or physical damage of the product. It must inform the market about what the product is in itself. So the label must provide some mandatory information to keep customers, to help customers quickly understand what this product is, how it is used, and why it is relevant to them. And third, your packaging must prove quality. So exporters need more than something that is attractive. I know we like to, say that we want our packaging to be very pretty and stand out. But quality is also important. We have to ensure that in meeting creativity and style, we're not compromising on quality. So exporters need more than attractive claims. They need specifications as well as records, testing where required, and certification that will also go along with your packaging. And fourth, and very important, with where you're going to be exporting your product, it must fit the market. So the product may need certain adjustments in terms of its size or your formulation that you use, the language that you include on your labeling and packaging, how it is designed, the instructions that you put, the amount of instructions, and of course, your price positioning is also a consideration. So if it is that you're looking to go for a more premium price, then the packaging and your labeling would also have to stand up to that. Um, and it will give you a better pricing position. So the order is very important here. So we want to first think about where is it that we want to export our product to, because that really determines many things going forward. Based on our destination markets, they will have certain requirements and requirements for your labeling and your packaging. And these requirements are things that must be finalized before your final design and print of what you already have. So you would have already gotten guidance from different agencies in Jamaica, whether it be JBDC, SRC, BSJ, or if you have somebody private who developed your labeling, and it may work in Jamaica. However, when you are exporting, then it is very important to consider what is required in that destination market before you do your final print to export that product. So I want to touch a little bit on packaging and, just how it may differ from product to product. So you can think about the primary packaging for the product. So this is the packaging that the actual product to be consumed will interact with. The secondary type of product, which is what you will package it in, and tertiary, which is really looking at moving the product from Jamaica to another international market and allowing it not to be compromised in any way. So when it comes to your primary packaging, this includes, for example, your bottle that you may use, your jar, your can, your pouch, your sachet, or your carton. It's material that must be compatible with the product and the filling process. And for your secondary packaging, so this may be, for example, a sleeve, a multi-pack, or display-ready tray, and it can improve the handling, merchandising, and protection of the product. I'll just go into some specificity in these. So when it comes to glass, it's very important to think about breakage and freight weight when you're shipping, because this can also impact cost. Um, People typically go for glass for a more premium feel product or something with a stronger barrier. Metal is also a type of packaging that people may use. This is typically for food, but can also be used for things like candles. Where it comes to food, this is typically to ensure a longer shelf life for the product. Working with your supplier, you can discuss things like the seam integrity or cohesion. Very popular, which is different types of plastic containers. So whether you're PET, HDPE, or PP, which this would be, for example, what you find your porridge mixes in, or like your yogurt or something that is going to be microwavable. So these are more lightweight and versatile, the more popular packaging that we see being used. And considerations for what specifically you're going to be choosing would be, is it something that will carry heat? Is it something that you want to be recyclable? Is it something that you want to think about the chemical compatibility of the product and the packaging? And a lot of this will also depend on the market that you're going in, because let's say you're exporting to the EU, for example, you may not or you may want to move away from certain packaging that is probably not recyclable, or in another sense, something that is going to promote environmental friendly use and that kind of thing. So you have your pouch and sachet, which is also becoming a very popular use in terms of product packaging, low material and freight weight. In terms of the risk of this, we see where there could be puncture risk as well as filling and sealing quality. So it would be important to find a supplier who can give you the most, what should I say now, ensure the best quality for this type of packaging if that's something that you're going to go with. Cardboard carton. So this is, for example, like what you may put your soaps in. And very interestingly, I wanted to point out for fresh produce as well. So I don't think a lot of consideration is put in terms of fresh produce. We just think about, okay, shipping the product, but you can actually have primary packaging for your produce itself. And I'll show you a picture with some of that I have. These will ensure ventilation protection. And what it does is help to avoid the product from being bruised, preventing moisture loss and airflow depending on the product. So here are some pictures of packaging that I've pulled for you to have a look at. So in terms of the type of glass packaging, variations are many. And so like many others, you would work with your supplier for the glass packaging to ensure that you're choosing the right one for you. There is one glass manufacturer in the region, and that's Carib Glass Limited. However, there are other suppliers locally. So while there's one regional manufacturer, there are several suppliers locally. But I've just put that here for when you have grown from the SME and you're a medium to large and you're looking to import your own glass packaging. But outside of this manufacturer, Carib Glass in Trinidad and Tobago, Jamaica does import glass packaging from all over the world, actually. The Dominican Republic, Colombia, China, which is very popular, and all the way from countries in Africa and even Spain and a few others. I just wanted to point that out. So, as I said, the glass is best used when you want to have like a premium feel for your product, protect product compatibility and flavor protection. And in using glass packaging, a suitable closure creates a more secure seal. I wanted to also show you other packaging, such as metal cans, for example, the Tetra Pak and the PP container, which are becoming the Tetra Pak and the PP container are definitely becoming more popular among food manufacturers. For metal cans, if this is something that you want to go into to ensure longer preservation for your foods, there is a manufacturer in Jamaica, Crown Packaging Jamaica Limited. And for Tetra Pak, this is currently done by Tradewinds Citrus Limited. So you can certainly reach out to these manufacturers, to discuss packaging options and services that they may be able to provide to you to meet your expert needs. Pouches is also something that's becoming very popular these days, especially in international markets. When you look at the products on the shelves, you will see pouches, and there are so many different variations that you can choose from, including flat bottom and stand-up pouches, pouches with spout. For example, I see some ketchups having that now, or even our own jerk sauces and stuff. There are pouches with zippers, and that are some that are are resealable. There are also vacuum and retort options, and there are some with a paper look or are printed flexible packs, right? So there are many options when it comes to pouches as well. And here's an example of the printed paperboard carton that you would put your soap in, for example. So it creates shelf presence and provide a print area for the product, so you can include a lot of information on there. It may require an inner container or barrier, like a plastic, for example, that will be around the soap specifically. And it promotes a premium finish for your product, and especially if it's something that um, people could give each other as a gift. Right, so this is typically used for like your cosmetics type of products. So the fresh produce, so this is what I really wanted to show, right? So this here, I believe, was it wasn't sweet sop, right? I think this is what this was. And here it's labeled as sour apple, but you can think of it as something like a sweet sop. So I know that mainly what we export from Jamaica would include yam and so forth. I'm not sure if any of you here are from agriculture, but I just wanted to ensure that the information was wide and would be able to guide both people in manufacturing and agriculture, seeing that we're so big on exporting fresh produce. So um, this is just to show you that there are options available to also provide packaging for your fresh produce. So here in the first picture, it's showing a packaging with a tray and a protective netting, which is like a plastic. And then in the second one, this is showing sweet potatoes in a mesh net bag. So there are options available, right? Other than the external corrugated box when you are exporting your product. All right, so here's something that I also want us to consider. Having your product on the shelf, a customer must be able to see whether the product has been open or compromised. And this is specifically for your manufactured goods that are going to be on the shelf. So some examples of the type of packaging, or sorry, of the type of tamper evidence aspects or elements could include your shrink band, inducted foil seals, breakaway cap rings, vacuum bottom lids, tear strips, perforated cartons, heat sealed pouches, and security tapes that leave a visible message. And I have two images here at the top of some tamper evidence protection that were provided for two jars of products. So um, tamper evident doesn't mean that it's tamper proof. It provides visible evidence of interference. So it should be combined with security closure, good manufacturing controls, your regular lot IDs, and that will allow for traceability. So I would imagine that you guys are exposed to some of this information already. I would hope so, and that this is really just a reminder. But as you go into the export market, you will find that a lot of the products on the shelves do have these elements incorporated. And so if you don't have them already, it's definitely a good consideration to start looking for suppliers that can provide you with this very comprehensive type of packaging. So value added inserts should solve a real customer need. A value-added insert should solve a genuine customer need rather than simply adding material and cost. So, for example, I have a picture here of a product from Etenio, and what they've done is to add a product, an accessory that you can use with the product. So this is very popular across cosmetics and a few food items as well. So some examples that you can include as value-added items in your packaging would be measuring and dosing tools, samples or smaller samples of other products that customers could try, recipes, preparation guidance. In some cases, people do include thank you cards, a card with a brand story, some promotional items. Very important are items that you would include to how to keep and care for the product, maintain it, and store it. And in some cases, people do also include gifts, collectibles, and reusable accessories. So these aren't mandatory, but really voluntary recommendations that you could include in your packaging just for to meet the needs of the consumers some more and to be able to connect with them because you are in Jamaica, they're in another market, and so the more you can do to be able to connect with the customer, the consumer, the better that is. All right, so we have the primary packaging for our product, right? So we can tick that box. So now it's important for us to look at our external packaging. And this must be able to protect the product through handling, stacking, storage, and international transportation. So it's very important that you use strong export quality corrugated fiber board. You can have the discussion with the supplier as to the strength of it. Is it double walled? Is it triple walled? How appropriate it is for heavy items, fragile items. Can it be used to facilitate my cold or frozen products? And once you start shipping, you should definitely make an assessment from the first time. Is this something that can withstand long distance, right? My product being exported from Jamaica to the international market without it being compromised. So the correct choice should also be based on what weight your product is and distribution conditions. So, is it going to be a straight shipment or is it going to be passed from one country to the other, one warehouse to the next until it gets to the final consumer? So, of course, um, the more the more rigorous the distribution is going to be or the transportation is going to be, then the stronger you're going to want to ensure that your shipping corrugated box is. So it's very important to, as I said, have that conversation with the supplier to ensure that it satisfies your needs of shipment without compromising the product. One of the challenges I've seen exporters have when it comes to shipping items that are cold or frozen. And in this case, it's especially more important to have that discussion about the packaging for your product, as well as with whoever is going to be doing the shipping for you. It's one thing to have a packaging that can, somewhat help to withstand the cold and everything. But if they don't have the appropriate container to ship your product in that facilitates cold storage, then the product the quality of the product might be at risk. So it's important to have that conversation there. Um, so on the labeling of the packaging as well, you want to ensure that you put things like keep refrigerated or frozen so that from the point of being exported to it being handled by your logistics provider, to it being arrived at a supermarket, if that's where that is going, they will always know how it is that this package should be handled. It is something that should be refrigerated and frozen. With this type of packaging, you find that in terms of shipping, it may be accompanied by ice, for example, or dry ice, based on what the carrier does to ensure that the product is safe and not compromised. So as I said, don't wait for the first commercial shipment to test the system. So once you've done your first shipment, you're gonna simulate the expected journey, and you're gonna also going forward include reasonable delay buffers. So have all these considerations. Measure the product temperature. So for your distributor, it's important that they measure the product temperature on arrival and also communicate this with you so that you're able to do your research testing and provide feedback to those who are going to be developing your packaging for you as well as shipping the product. So when designing the shipping case for your product, or thinking about the shipping case for your product, first you want to ensure that you think about separating the units. You don't want to have anything being crushed or damaged. And so, for example, based on the corrugated box that you're going to use, should it have dividers? Should it have paper? Should it have foam? Um, think about the strength. So, as I said, look at the export. As you export, think about the quality of the box. Confirm the weight of your product to what the box is able to withstand. And even think about when you're taping the product. So ask your shipping provider how um, if they're gonna tape it for you, which some of them do, or if it is that you're gonna tape it yourself. So use strong tape with H taping if you're gonna do the taping. Strap and protect the corners where necessary. And on your markings for the packaging, show the information for your consignee, the carton count, the weight, the PO, and the handling conditions. So avoid things like household tape, string, overloaded cartons, and empty space that allows products to shift, right? And here's just some more information in terms of the markings that are important for your product. I've also included information on some local suppliers for packaging in case this is something that you do not know. And there may be others as well. So you have AMG Packaging and Paper Company, Boxpert Dynamic Packaging Products, Jamaica Packaging Industries, Red River, Roll Labels and Packaging Limited. So these are packaging suppliers I've identified based on who are members of the JMA, but there may be others. And as I have continued to emphasize, ask every supplier the material specification and food contact evidence for the packaging. What's their minimum order quantity and lead time? And this is very important because you do not want to miss a sailing, right? So because you have to work with the time for your shipping company as well as your distributor. So it's very important to understand from your packaging supplier about the lead time as well as their minimum order quantity. Understanding their minimum order quantity will also allow you to know if you should be getting products from the manufacturer or somebody who buys from the manufacturer and then resell. Also ask your supplier about tooling, plates, and artwork requirements. So some of these manufacturers do have the type of infrastructure in place where they can add a specific artwork to your packaging. So if this is something that you're looking for, then you can have that conversation with them. So you can ask them also for their testing data and quality controls for their product. You can request samples based on specifications that you would want, and ask them to do a pilot testing. And if it is something that you're gonna have to ship in Jamaica because from outside of Jamaica because it's not available here, then it's important to then ask questions about freight costs, freight time, continuity of supply, and then you would have to think about how you're going to be ordering and storing those.
Yes,
All
good
right,
morning.
you
Yes, I
can
have
go
a
ahead.
question. Very interesting presentation. But I have made an observation that most of the products that she's talking about is like the food kind, and I understand. So my question is, how is it for like bags? I have a business that I do bags, like pouches and tote bags and so on. Is that a viable option in getting into the export market?
Okay, so your question is about if there is an export opportunity for your product.
Yes.
Okay, I mean, so what I would say is market research is very important. And at the JMA, once a manufacturer says that they want to export, we start by looking at what's the product that they have and seeing what markets are importing those products. So very important is something that's called the commodity code for your product. That's something that we can work with you to figure out what that commodity code is, right? But let's say the commodity code for bags is 0104. That is what you use in terms of trade language. So we'll check to see which countries are importing those products to get an understanding of where there might be market potential. And then we can also go further to see which one of them are getting these products from Caribbean countries, for example. So the bottom line of where I'm going is that we can look at which countries are importing those products, which ones are willing to get it from the Caribbean. And we can look to see who are the specific importers there. We can also think about it in another way in terms of who are your target market. So in Jamaica with the products that you're currently supplying, who are your target market? Is it more fitting for a diaspora market, a Jamaican diaspora, or it can be more wider in terms of a Caribbean diaspora? And then we can look at where are those persons located. So we can look at our traditional markets in the US, Canada, UK, for example. And then again, once we have established that, we look at the numbers. So if we're looking at where these persons are, we can try to figure out, okay, what's the size of the diaspora there? So what the size of my market look like? And then how is it that I get my product to them? Or even before that, how do I actually test to see if they would want my product? And there are a number of ways that we could explore that, whether it be social media and try to engage persons, whether it be going to a trade show or some kind of pop-up, getting the market feel for the product, getting feedback from customers. Or we can also have engagements with, for example, like a JMEA or a Jam Pro who might be more in the market, have people in the market, and can give you some perspective as to what our customers buying and you know, what what are customers buying in terms of your type of product, what exactly they're looking for, and being able to guide you. Um, does that information help?
A lot. Thank you much. That helps. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Okay, I see we have a couple more questions in the chat. Are you seeing them?
No, could you go ahead and read them off for me, please?
Okay, all right, one sec. All right, I see Arlene Green is asking, does this export label go on the shipping box or product?
The one that I have on screen now
Is Arlene there? Arlene, can you just clarify that question? She said yes.
all right. So this is just so this is not a depiction of like a specific export label. It's just to give an idea really. So the label that goes on your specific product or your packaging, that will depend on where specifically you're exporting to and what are their requirements. In terms of the labeling on the shipping, your shipping company will also let you know specifically what they are looking for. So this is just like a general example of what's typically included on your labels.
Okay. All right, thank you for that. All right, we also have a question from Mark Chisholm, who is asking, is there any way to get that type of market or export data from reputable or public sites? Sometimes that is the hardest part for the market research in Jamaica.
Yes, I'm happy to let you know that there are resources. Um, so there are a few, right? So there's Trade Board, Trade Board Limited or Jamaica Trade Board. They have developed some websites that you can access. One of them is Export Jamaica, and there's also Export Academy. So Export Jamaica is more so where you would go on, as I spoke about your commodity code. So you're gonna need that, which you can get that from customs first, from their international liaison unit. So you can ask them what the commodity code is for your product. Then you can go on to Trade Board's um, Export Jamaica platform and you use that particular code or the product name and you would search for the relevant data. So how much of that product is Jamaica exporting and which countries are importing it from Jamaica. And then with Export Academy that Trade Board has, it allows you to test knowledge of what you already know and show you the gaps of what you don't know and show you the required information. On a more international scale, there's something that's called the International, so that's the ITC Trade Map, which it shows you data for trading products all over the world. So again, using your commodity code or description of your product, on ITC Trade Map, you'll be able to see every single country that imports this item, how much of it they're importing in terms of volume, what's the value that they've imported it at, what's the unit price, who your potential competitors might be. With that website, however, it does take a little bit of practicing, maneuvering to be able to understand it, but you should be able to find some learning videos on YouTube, and that Jamie, we can help you with that as well. But you are also able to purchase market research, which is way more comprehensive. That's something that the GMA can provide you with. So we will look at not only what the import potential is for the product or into another country or looking at the export potential from Jamaica, but we can provide you with everything down to the labeling requirements, what's the tariff that you'll have to pay going into the market, what are the other taxes, what are all the considerations or procedures and requirements are concerned. So the short answer is yes, there are platforms out there and resources that you can access, whether being unpaid or paid, depending on what you're looking for.
Okay, thank you so much, Shanicia. I hope that provided enough clarity for that question. We have a couple more questions. We have late Orly Forrester James, who has a hand up. So you can go ahead with your question. Right. In the interim, let me give you a couple more of the questions that are there. Okay, Sean Nicholson is saying he is from the agriculture sector, but he realizes that you didn't speak much on agricultural produce. So is it the same procedure with exporting agricultural produce?
All right, so specifically, I would have been talking about packaging, um, which I would have given some examples of packaging pertaining to agricultural produce here. So I would have looked at packaging in terms of what can be the direct packaging or primary packaging for your product that the good would be in direct contact with. So this I would have shown some examples here. So you could use or with what I've seen in international markets for products that are exported. So like your let's say a yam and your sweet potato. I've seen like a mesh net bag. In other cases, I've seen where people use a tray as well as a protective netting. So just like what we see in our local supermarkets here. But for some exporters, they do go a little bit more to ensure that the product is very well protected from bruise or moisture losses. So then the next step after the primary packaging for the fresh produce would then be the type of corrugated box used. And for fresh produce, I typically see where exporters use something with what do you call it? Um, there's something inside. It's not a film, but there's something inside the box that ensures it doesn't compromises the product or it's more durable than a regular corrugated box. So what you could do in terms of agriculture is just speak with the provider for the packaging to say what can you add to the corrugated box. What can you add to it in terms of substance or extra walls that will ensure that the agricultural produce is protected on top of what you've done for your primary packaging, if that's something that's necessary for the product that you're exporting. I hope that answers your question. And information on cold chain would also apply to fresh produce if it is that it must be something that is kept cool.
Okay. All right, thank you so much. I see where Mark Chisholm had responded to one of your answers and said, "Oh, wow, thank you, very helpful." I am also seeing where Deron Williams is saying, "Do you have a list of agricultural produce importers in the eastern coast of the US?"
Well, at the JMA, yes, that's something that we can provide you with. We can supply distributors for products. So again, what we would look at is your product, definitely looking at your export readiness for that market. So it's important to consider what their requirements are in the US and to see if you have met those requirements, because the buyers will certainly be asking for that. So before we have that conversation with the buyers, or before you have that conversation with the buyers, once you have a buyer listing, it's important just to tick the boxes for the US in terms of have you met the requirements, right? So once you've done that, then yes, the JMA can supply you with a list of distributors. JamPro, it also does those connections as well.
Okay, all right, thank you so much for that information. I am seeing two more questions and then we'll just allow you to move on to the other part of the presentation. I'm seeing where Danny Francis has put up a website and was asking if this is the website link for ITC. It is www.trademap.org/en/goods/time series exports and so forth.
Okay, I can check that out later.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. Christian Hunter is also saying, "Do you need a membership to gain access to distribution lists, etc. from the JMEA?"
No, you don't have to be a member, but being a member, you can get a discount on the service.
Oh, All right, that's fantastic. All
Okay.
right, so we're looking forward to the next part of the presentation, so you can just go ahead.
All right. All right. So what we've discussed so far, and thank you everyone for staying. So what we've discussed so far are packaging requirements. So we'll no more go into labels. So an export label has two jobs. One, it must comply with the destination's market requirements and help the customer understand the product quickly. I would imagine that you guys know all about labels already once you've been a member of JBDC. So I hope that this aspect is also a reminder. The front panel normally needs a clear hierarchy, like what we have here. So the customer should see the brand, what the name of the product is, um, variety or flavor, and the net quantity. And the side or the back can carry a lot of the detailed information. So depending on the product, and where the product is going to be exported to, mandatory information may typically include the common or legal name of the product, or like the scientific name, listing your ingredients, pointing out things like the allergen, having your nutrition information, net quantity, dates, batch, lot codes, storage conditions, directions for use, warnings, origin, very important, and details of the responsible business, which would be you, or in some arrangements, depending on the relationship that you have with who you're exporting to and the business arrangements that you guys have, it may include the information for who is importing the product. Just to clarify, think about it in this way. When you see a product on the shelf in Jamaica and it has the name of the manufacturer here, but it says made by like somebody else or product of somewhere else. So depending on the business relationship that you will set up with who you're exporting to, this could influence some of the information that you have on your labeling in terms of um, the business name that's on there. Yeah, so hope that part was clear. And as you as you may know as well, claims such as natural, organic, sugar-free, or chemically proven are things that must be accurate, must be supported, and must be permitted based on where you're exporting to before you're gonna even include this on your artwork. In addition, I also want to say that don't assume that the Jamaican label that you have can simply be reused. A lot of the times we love our labels and we hug it up, but you have to be mindful that terminology, um, language, layout, colors are all things that might differ in terms of the different destinations and what they accept or how they may interpret it. So a terminology that you may use on your label, or even a color, let's say for example, you use a color red, but you're exporting to somewhere like Asia, they don't associate red with something positive. So depending on where you're going to be exporting your product to, it may mean that you have to consider the color that you use, the language that you use, the terminologies that you use, and so on. Um, when it comes to the mandatory information for the labeling that we have set out here in Jamaica, as you export, you may find that some of the placements might differ in terms of how the information is organized. Even down to the font size, the country that you're exporting to may have some preference as well. So what I've done here is to just give an illustrative food example. So for the United States, imported foods generally require truthful and informative labeling in English. Must use the applicable U.S. nutrition facts and declaration formats. For Canada, most mandatory information on consumer prepackaged food must appear in both English and French, subject to specific exemptions. Canadian rules also prescribe the metric declarations and the Canadian nutrition facts format, right? So if you have different countries in mind, let's say you have three different countries in mind of where you want to export your product to, it's very useful to consider the requirements of each, seeing which market it would be easier and more feasible for you to get into based on the adjustments that you'll have to make to your current product. So don't automatically reuse your domestic label. In some cases, it might be okay. In another case where you're exporting, it may not be acceptable or may need your artwork to be redone. So besides regulatory considerations, your labeling should also consider commercial and cultural fits. So as I was giving you an example earlier, looking at the meaning of colors, symbols, all these different level of enhancements, different enhancements that you use for your labeling. So when you think about your commercial fit, study the category codes, looking at your format, colors, claims, and information hierarchy. Also look at um, testing the label, right, as well. And I would say testing it by looking at what your competitors have against yours and doing some level of comparison. And in terms of the cultural fit, again, looking at your colors, symbols, look at how words are translated. So if you use a specific word based on where you want to export it to, see if it's something that would have a different meaning to them. And ensure that you either adjust it or probably don't include it just so that you're not being offensive. So the labeling must survive the product's environment. Refrigerated products may require moisture-resistant face stock and adhesive. Frozen products need a refrigerator-grade adhesive that remains secure through low temperatures and condensation. And for your oils, sauces, and cosmetics, these may require oil or chemical-resistant material and inks. So again, these are conversations you can have with your supplier. Always ensure that you are getting the most efficient, effective labeling for your product. So we've moved away from looking at not only what should be included, but the quality of it. So you don't want to have where you're exporting your product and the labeling is coming off. Whether because it is a chemical, it is a cosmetic that has oil, or it is something that is cold and causing the labeling to strip off. You don't want to have that. So it's important that you have that conversation from the get-go. In high humid markets, based on where the product is going to go, it's important to test for curling, peeling, fading, and smudging. I can't tell you how much of this we've seen with labels. And for online fulfillment, if that's something that some of you will be going in, so e-commerce, the barcode must remain scannable after abrasion and handling. Sustainability and recycling are also very important considerations and are can make you be more competitive as well, because a lot of countries are now looking for that. And so you'll find where importers then have to work with suppliers, or well, in your case, you would be the supplier, so they would have to work with suppliers who are providing these types of products, so environmentally friendly, um, and so on and so forth, based on what their country's regulations are mandating them to do. So quality is not demonstrated only by placing a certification or a logo on the package. It is demonstrated by a system of evidence. So first you want to define the requirements for the raw material that you're going to be using in your product, um, processing, and finished product and packaging. And I say this because you may have your product and you use certain raw material that isn't accepted in the country that is being exported to. So that's also in doing the research of where to export and the market that you've chosen, it's very important to have that conversation with a potential buyer or a regulator in the market, to say, well, this is what I have, this is what my product is, this is what it includes, these are the raw materials I've used, this is how I've processed it. This is what the finished product looks like, and this is what the packaging looks like. Is there anything about this that is not accepted in your country? Second, control. So use approved suppliers, documented procedures, and calibrated equipment. And the calibrated equipment, of course, would be based on, where your product is being produced. Are you producing it yourself? Are you using somebody to do contract manufacturing? So you want to ensure that they are able to allow you that traceability in terms of having the documentations in place. If the regulator in the country that you're exporting to decides that they want to have access to this information, then you must be able to provide it. So all your documented procedures should be either be in place by you if you're manufacturing the product, or whoever is making it for you. And the equipment that they're using to make the product should also be calibrated. And in terms of the approved suppliers, this is also important in terms of traceability, right? So you want to ensure that if you're using, let's say you're using agricultural material in your products, the farmers that you're working with should also be approved, right? By either RADA, or if it's like a specific spice. So based on whichever authority is responsible for regulating them, it's important that you know that information. So if called upon, you are able to supply that. Third, you want to verify, so test the critical attributes and inspect your seals, your labels, your coding, and your net weight, once you have your packaging in place. Fourth, trace. So maintain lot records, retain your samples, practice and recall the procedure. A recall plan is something that's very important. And, this is in case if you notice that something has gone wrong with the product, how do you then recall it from the shelves? In terms of quality as well, you want to ensure that you have systems in place where you are able to get and review complaints. So certification may be legally required for some products or commercially requested by a buyer. So you need to, in terms of certification, you need to confirm exactly what's needed. So I've spoken a lot about getting the information and requirements, but I know some of you may say, okay, where can I get this information from? So every country has what's called a World Trade Organization inquiry point where you can make inquiries. And they're supposed to help with technical regulations and standards, labeling, packaging, requirement information, whatever it is that whatever information may be important for you to get into a market. Um, you have you have an inquiry point for every country in the world, or most countries in the world. There is one here in Jamaica, which is the Bureau of Standards. What Bureau of Standards will do, what the inquiry point office will do, is then engage with other inquiry points. So if you want to go to the US, for example, you can reach out to the inquiry point in the US, or you can reach out to the inquiry point at Bureau of Standards, and they can reach out to the US for you to get the information. So it will be important for you to provide what is the product that you want to export, what is the commodity code for the product, what's your ingredient and composition, where you want to export to, and any specific questions that you may have. So that is where you get all the information I've talked about when I say have that conversation or seek confirmation. This is really the best source to get that. And you can go on the website for WTO. So you can type in WTO TBT inquiry point contacts, and you'll see the contacts come up for all the countries around the world. So in terms of overall adaptability, on the legal side of things, we've talked about looking at your ingredients and what may be required in another country, because you may have an ingredient that it is banned. So legally, it's important that you utilize the inquiry points to check on that information. We've talked about your claims, the language that you use, all the warnings. We've spoken about culturally the adaptation that you may need to make. I just want to add in terms of cultural that formulation is something that manufacturers may need to adjust, whether it be a food or a cosmetic. So let's say we're talking about a food, right? We do a lot of hot sauce here in Jamaica and a lot of jerk seasonings, which we love very much. But let's say you want to export to Japan. Um, they love Jamaica and Jamaican products too, but then they don't like spicy products. So you may have to come up with a different version that is not so hot for them. So you'll have to make that adjustment. In terms of fragrance and or cosmetics that we have, again, there are certain fragrances that we may go for here in Jamaica, but then as you export, you find that you may have to make some adjustments based on what that market prefers. Um, Also, very important to consider your imagery. We've talked a lot about that. Religious and ethical preferences. So, based on the product that you want to export, considering religious and ethical factors will help you in terms of how do you even promote the product in that particular market. Are there can you work with your distributors so that on certain holidays, for example, you are packaging the product a certain way to appeal to a certain market, or based on the religious or ethical practices, they're just, based on how you portray the product with your packaging and your labeling, there are certain things that you would do or would not do, or you would just not consider a specific product for a particular market based on these preferences. And then in terms of physical adaptation, noting the climate difference between Jamaica and where you're going to export to is also important. And the impact of this on like the shelf life, right? And of course, storage conditions and your packaging. And commercially, we've also mentioned a little bit about that, where you may have to make adaptations to the size of your product. So you'll find that what some exporters do is they have like a standard product. Let's say you're thinking about a Christmas cake, right? So you have like a standard um, size, 3-inch size, but then based on where you're exporting to, maybe you want to make more bite size. Or let's say you're doing jerk seasoning, you may be exporting to a Jamaican restaurant. So it may not always be that you're exporting to go on the shelf of a supermarket, but you may be doing more commercial volumes. And so instead of doing your sauces for a glass jar, no, you're looking at buckets because you're targeting a Jamaican restaurant for the seasoning or the sauce that you have, right? So commercially as well, there will be adaptations in terms of how you price your products because of course there's so many considerations that you'll need to have and adjustments that you'll need to make. And so this will definitely influence the price point. And what I would definitely recommend as well is look at what your competitors are doing and looking at your product costs, of course, and seeing what price you would want for your product. Compare that to what your competitors are doing. Is it that you you can price higher than what you were initially thinking about, matching it to their offerings that they have already? Or is it that your price would go way over and now you can think about marketing yourself as a more premium product? Preparation, instructions, accessories, unfamiliar ingredients, all come under the adaptation of usability of your product, which you mentioned, and sustainability as well, which I said is very important. Is a very important consideration to be more competitive now, especially if you're going to look at exporting to any UK or EU country. So this is just a summary of when you're looking at your adaptation. So you want to define the your target market, right? You want to compare your product to your competitors, looking at the price, how their products looks, how they market it. You want to confirm all the regulations and buyer specifications and logistics. So along with your regulators here in Jamaica, along with your trade inquiry point, along with your regulators in the export market, your potential buyers are a very good source of information. They can guide you on a lot of things and do some of the work for you as well. And then logistics, of course, you can work with your potential buyer as to what's the best way to get the product there. So after you confirm, you have your prototype. So you would have had your adjusted formula and labeling, and then you're gonna test the product in the market, get feedback from your consumers and distributors, and then you're gonna scale. So commit to volume only after evidence supports your decision. So volume is very, very important, and you don't want to commit a large number that you cannot sustain. So that's a very important consideration that you must have because the moment that you are not able to supply, you know, buyers aren't gonna want to work with you anymore. So don't overextend yourself. Or as an alternative, you can look at a way to expand sustainably. For example, have someone contract manufacture the product for you or a group of people who make a similar product can also come together and see how you share resources. So before you do your shipment, this is just a checklist that I have to ensure that you are covering everything, right? So you can have a look at this once you have received the presentation. All right, so what's your next step? Choose the market, verify the regulations and requirements, have your prototype, and test before committing to the volume. So this is the end of my presentation. Thank you. The floor is now open for additional questions and discussions.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much, Shanicia, for that presentation. It was certainly very informative. So if anybody has any, I'm seeing a lot of claps going up for you. So I'm seeing where our participants definitely agree with that. Uh, if anybody has any additional questions, you can just place it in the chat or you can just raise your hand. And just to let you know as well, JBDC does provide that type of label support in the sense of guiding you on what you need to bear in mind to design your labels. So if you are not a client of the JBDC, please do not hesitate to sign up and you can engage our visual communications department once you are a client and get that level of support, because in designing your labels for your products, they actually bear all of these things in mind: the colors, the layout of the label, the necessary information that should be on it. All of that is put into consideration when our visual communications department is actually doing a design for our clients. So does anybody have any questions? All right, I'm seeing where Yvonne Elliott Mattis, sorry, she said, hi Shanicia, how do you suggest an exporter ensure standards is of a high quality in the event of joint supply?
Okay, when you say joint supply, okay, so you have different people who are making the product. Well, usually each each producer should ensure that they, I mean, have these similar standards in place. And I would imagine that it's a discussion that you have to say if we're both gonna export to a single buyer, for example, then it would be important that the both of you come to the agreement as to what standards you have in place. So you want to use people who have like procedures in place so that there's nothing compromised in terms of the quality of the product. And when it comes to standards, then we definitely have to have Bureau of Standards as a part of that discussion because they are the ones who um, deal with the standard development. And then we have the NCBJ who can do the actual certification of the facilities to say that, well, each individual facility is on point. So when you're exporting, or in general in manufacturing, even when you have what should I say, a consolidation in that sort, each facility has to have um, the right procedures in place and its own certification.
Okay, all right, thank you so much. Did that answer the question for you, Yvonne? You can just answer in the chat. I am seeing also where Alicia Jackson Allen, she's asking, can you reshare the second to last slide? She's saying she was distracted.
Well, we'll share the presentation, so unless
Okay.
it is that you have a question, Mrs. Allen, about the second to last slide.
I think it was giving some information where we could reach out
Okay. All
about
right. Well,
the.
look, you'll get the presentation then.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So does anybody else have any further questions? Okay, well, in the interim, I must say that I believe it was a very informative presentation. And I have seen, whereas we have embarked on two actual vis, vis, biz zones, rather, sorry, biz zones covering preparing for the export market. And I'm seeing a correlation between what you as a presenter said this week and our presenter last week. And I think some of the key things to me that has stood out is the fact that planning and research, they're key aspects towards being ready to export to other markets, right? So
Absolutely.
yes. So I am seeing where we have to be considering the information about the markets, what are these people looking for? What do they relate to? We have to plan our production, we have to plan our packaging. There are so many considerations. So it's not just getting up and deciding that this looks feasible to export. We have to do some background work, right?
Yes, absolutely.
All right, and so what exactly can the JMEA do in terms of providing support to persons who are interested in embarking on
All
export?
right. So what we do is so we look at what level you're at, what level of expert readiness that you're at. Um, so at the JMA, we have over 600 members, and over 80% of those are in the MSME category. And so it means a lot of the work that we do is towards export readiness. And so we'll work with partners like yourself, JBDC, JAMPRO, and others to ensure that information sessions are delivered. So we also work with private partners like DHL, Copa Airlines, Caribbean Airlines, to provide guidance in terms of shipping and expectations and tips. And then we have other international partners from even other countries as well. So if you want to get into a specific country, whether it be in the Caribbean, the US, the UK, Canada, will partner to organize information sessions on how do you access that particular market. So information about export readiness is very, very important. And even if you are already exporting, what you'll find is that information is still important because it's constantly changing, even
Yes.
from a customs perspective where you have to utilize your ASICODA and your J-Swift. And so we ensure that our members are equipped with that information. Now, when you are ready to export or if you're ready to expand, then that is where we go into the market research side of things, where we look at what product you have and where the export potential is. People, depending on the individual or the business, they may require a different amount of information. So for some persons, they may just want the database of distributors or buyers or supermarkets. And so that's something that we can supply. But then you have persons who may want more comprehensive information, which is important. So you're looking at what are the taxes that the product is going to encounter once it gets there, to understand how expensive your product might be, who your potential competitors are, and how much of that product are they supplying to the market. So that is market research that we can provide to you, as much information as what we can find. And then once you are already exporting, we can then take you on our trade missions and trade shows that we organize. So trade shows that we have done, we've brought companies to Japan, the Bahamas, Panama, Dominican Republic. And so, based on where we see members' interest are in products, we will organize trade mission to those markets or facilitate participation in trade shows.
All of that sounds very exciting because I'm sure a lot of these MSMEs would love to be on some of those trade tours with you all,
Absolutely.
getting exposed to these different markets. I'm seeing where Yvonne Elliott Mattis has said, does the JMEA have any research on any of the major markets?
So we have done research on markets before, but here's the thing, I don't want you to think about research generally because it really should be about your specific product going
Mhm.
into a specific market at a specific point in time. So
Yes.
even if, let's say, we've done market research on sweet potatoes going to the UK 2 years ago, we may need to refresh that now based on changes that would have happened in the regulatory landscape.
Mhm. Yes. And I'm seeing where she also said if the bigger firms, I guess within the JMEA, if they actually mentor the smaller producers.
So there is some of that does happen. So members will reach out to us if they need guidance or if they're having certain challenges. And so we will reach out to our larger manufacturers and exporters to be able to guide them accordingly. But more formally, we do have a mentorship program which we partnership with through JBDC and JAMPRO for the Export Max. So for the component, what we've done is to look at all your gaps. It's not just about getting somebody to help you with exports because, there's so many elements to doing business. So you want to export, yes, but maybe your challenge is with marketing or finance. And so we will pair you with a mentor who has those level of expertise to be able to help you with those specific challenges so that overall you can become more export ready. So we will be launching another phase of the Export Max session soon in a few months. So that's something that you can look out for and apply for.
Okay. And so, of course, with everything that you have said, Shanisha, we do encourage you to become a member of the JMEA and to become a client of the JBDC because you can get true benefits once you are a member and also a client. And if you check your chat, you will be reminded of our YouTube channel where you can access this webinar and also other webinars, such as the previous webinar and that was done last week and that laid the groundwork for this because we looked on planning, how do you assess to know that you are ready for the export market? And of course, this week we took it a step further and allowed you to look into what do I need to know? How can I prepare my products for the actual export markets to ensure that they can fit in there? So we can also stay connected by our JBDC social media platforms. We're on Instagram, we are on all the major platforms, and so you can search for us looking for JBDC Jamaica to interact with our social media pages. I really believe that this was such a good presentation. I was here taking a lot of notes because even though we do interact with clients on a regular basis and provide them with this type of information, I believe it was so you provided even a little bit more information on what we need to consider and the markets. And as you said, the markets, they're not static. Every day there's a new policy. We have external shocks, we have wars, we have new policies every day. So we have to stay on the forefront, being informed, being ready to acknowledge what's going on and be able to adapt with our business and our products, right? So
Absolutely.
I'm seeing Shanisha has put her contact information in the chat. So you can just make a note of that in the event that you want to get additional information from her on her presentation and also on the JMEA. It was an absolute pleasure having you here today. And I learned a lot. I saw where people before acknowledged and they gave you a lot of claps and a lot of thumbs up to say they really enjoyed your presentation as well. And we look forward to everybody here becoming a member if you're not already of the JMEA and also of the JBDC, becoming a client rather. So thank you so much, Anissa, for your time and for your excellent presentation.
Thank you too. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Okay. So until next time, when we will present you with another, I'm sure, very interesting topic and also very informative that will assist you on your journey towards entrepreneurship. So until next time, here at the JBDC Biz Zone, we'll sign out officially. Thank you and bye. Thank you for being here.